Hey, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erica and I appreciate you being here. Today we are back for the thrilling conclusion in my Cosmere series. Of course, I am talking about the first trilogy of Mistborn. This is the final installment, The Hero of Ages. Mr. Brandon Sanderson really locked this thing up. I am making my way through the Cosmere for the first time because apparently I've been busy for the last 20 years. So this is my first venture through Sanderson's work, and so far I gotta tell ya, had a great time, even though this is only the third book of his that I've read. What I'm gonna do is I will give some general spoiler-free thoughts first, my opinion of the book, and then I'm gonna have a special little spoiler section in case you also have not read The Hero of Ages before, you don't want to be spoiled yet. By all means, I will not spoil you. I will save that for the dedicated spoiler section. That'll be the second part of the video. So right now, you're safe. I will give you plenty of warning before I start actually discussing spoilers for the book. So I will say that this final installment I think was a really strong entry into the series. It was a really good balance in pacing between action, but also seeing planning and also getting backstory. We've been waiting for backstory, right? And thankfully this author, Mr. Brandon Sanderson, he did not disappoint. I love backstory for characters. It really helps me to understand a character better. I mean, not just characters, but in real life too. I love knowing people's backstories, even when I know you in real life. So I thought that was a great part of this book, getting to see more of what happened, how we all got here to where we are today. It was nice too because he rotates these things, between action and the planning or the traveling, and then also seeing some of what happened in the past. It's constantly being rotated, so I felt like this book felt really fresh the whole way through, with the pacing. I wasn't bored at all. I would say there was maybe a couple of chapters in the book that I felt could have been shorter, but though that was what, 20 or 30 pages out of an almost 600 page book. So I feel like that's pretty good. I didn't think those chapters were bad. It just, some events happen in them that I don't know. I don't personally find very interesting. I'm not sure how the fandom feels about them. Maybe a lot of people love the things that I don't particularly love, but that's okay. I will take the 30 pages of something I'm only mildly interested in for, in exchange for the rest of the book that I was extremely interested in. So definitely no problem with how it was paced throughout the series, the first two books and this one. I've enjoyed it so much. I find myself disappointed when it ends, not because I feel like they weren't good endings, but because I want to stay with the characters, stay in the story, see what happens next. So I think that's a sign of a really good writer. In case you didn't know, okay, newsflash, I'm announcing that Brandon Sanderson's writing is compelling. I know it's a hot take, but I understand now why he is so popular, because he does keep you, at least me, and apparently many millions of us, keeps you wanting to read, keeps you engaged, keeps you invested, keeps you wanting to find out what happens next. I love books that can draw me in like that. I also really loved that he chose in this book to focus on characters that I think in the past, certainly at least in the first book, we would have considered them side characters, but now they've taken center stage, which one of my favorite character in the entire trilogy is Sazed. And yes, if you haven't watched my other videos, I'm calling him Sazed, even though I feel like that's not how you're supposed to pronounce it. That's my headcanon. This is what my headcanon looks like. Let me put a picture up, okay? In that headcanon, instead of a cannonball, is the word Sazed, or at least how I pronounce it. That is what is in my headcanon, okay? So we got to focus a lot on Sazed in this book, which I really loved. I love how relatable he is. He's gone through so many difficult things in his life, but he's always had a sense of purpose until now. He's questioning his purpose here. He's questioning the things that he knows. He's really struggling with his mental health. I think so much of his journey, especially in this book, can be relatable for a lot of us. And Elend as well. Elend was focused on as a character in this book, which I thought was great because he still had a lot of development to do, especially after the events of the last book, which again, I will not spoil in case you haven't read it, but some big things happened for Elend in the last book. And so we see now how he's dealing with that, where we've come to from that point. Alend is also on his own journey. Much like Sazed, he spent his whole life having ideals and believing that he knew his place in the world and what he wanted to do. Now that he's an adult and he's in the position to act, he is having to make some really difficult choices. And in this book, you see him going through his thought process of how he's arriving at the decisions he's arriving at, to be able to reconcile. Is he going to be able to stick with his ideals? Is he going to have to change his plans for what's going to realistically work? I think that, again, it's so relatable because I think that's so many of us go through that process as we get older, but especially moving from like new adult and out of that, like our entire perception of how things work changes. We realize, I think most of us, that we might have to alter our plans a little bit to adjust for what the world is actually throwing at us. And so it's very relatable to watch these two characters go through their transformation process and their development in this book. It also felt that Vin took more of a side character role, at least for me. I haven't looked to see if other people felt that way as well, but I was actually not disappointed in that. I don't dislike Vin, but I just felt like, especially with the last book, a lot of her actual development as a character, we kind of got where we needed to be with her. And for this book, I would say there were definitely things that happened with Vin. Vin had her own storyline, but I would say as far as development, I didn't really see a lot of development. Even at the end with her storyline, which I will not spoil, I think that like her decisions at the end of the book really just showed who she is as a character rather than like showing further development of her as a character. But I could be alone in this, and to be honest, I've been sitting and pondering this book for several days since I finished it. It's something, the ending really stuck with me, so maybe I will come to feel differently about Vin's actions in this book and at the end of the book. But right now I'm okay with having her just sort of be off to the side a little bit in this third installment, because we had a lot of other characters, I think, that had much more important development and actions in order to drive the story, especially so we had like Sazed and Alend, and I would say Spook. I would say the three of them were probably equally main characters, maybe even Tensoon as well. I like all of them, so I was happy to read through their perspectives. Many of them were in different locations as the story was going on, so again, it kept everything fresh, being able to go to different perspectives. All of that, they all had their own goals for what they needed to get through in this book, so I think it was a smart way to tell this story, to focus on them and some of the other smaller characters, and just have Vin was there doing her own thing, I feel, but she wasn't the main focus like she was in book one. One of the things that I've discovered through Mistborn so far is that I really appreciate that Brandon Sanderson gives me answers to the questions that I have. It's very satisfying to walk away knowing that like the critical questions that I had, those things were addressed. The author wasn't just like throwing things out there, waiting, wanting to keep you going. He's ready to give you the payoff. That's what I really want. I didn't leave the book feeling like there were critical concepts or components to the book that were just like unanswered or I didn't understand. I left the book feeling like everything that I really wanted to know, I did get answers to. I feel like the foreshadowing was done really well with the series and with this book, and especially I would say in like the last half of this book, I even recognized while I was reading it that I was having like instinctual feelings of ideas about certain things that were going on in the book. Like it was just right there, just out of reach, where I would be able to say, you know what, this is the answer to that question, but I just wasn't quite there. And then when I finally got the answers to the questions, it was like, yes, this makes sense, which I love that. I love books that make sense. I need books for me to enjoy them. I need them to make sense in the world in which they exist, because that lets me buy in. When I get answers or characters are doing things, none of this stuff makes sense. I'm just like, I can no longer buy in. I can no longer be invested because like this isn't lining up. I felt like Sanderson really delivered answers that made sense in the entire storyline that he set up over the past 3 books. I know his writing method is to do like a complete series outline before he even starts writing, right? That's my understanding. I feel like that really came through with the way he was able to do some foreshadowing in here because again, it dropped just enough breadcrumbs where I could like formulate ideas, but I was still kind of surprised, but yet also like, of course that's the answer because what else could it be? Like this is the answer that makes sense. Because overall I felt I walked away feeling so satisfied with this trilogy. Now I'm like, well, I want to know what happens next. Like I want to know what happens in this world and with these characters, and I don't know that that's going to be addressed in the second era of Mistborn. Maybe some of those questions that I have will be addressed, but I feel like I just want more of the series, and I feel like that's an indicator that I just really, really loved what an author did with their writing. Overall, I decided to rate this book 4 stars, and that's only because, like, for 5 stars, it's got to be something that's just like, oh my god. Number one, the first book in this series, which was, of course, The Final Empire, that one I rated 5 stars because that one sucked me in. That one I couldn't put down. That one I was like, oh my god. But the subsequent 2 books, they're very, very good, extremely enjoyable to read, but it just didn't have that same, like, pull, like, oh my god, I have to keep reading this. I don't care what time of night it is. And so this was an extremely satisfying book. I thought it was great as an ending to the trilogy. I think the next one on my list is going to be The 11th Metal. I'll have to double check. I'm following the reading list from the Cosmere sub on Reddit, one of the reading lists they have. If you're also interested in the reading list, maybe you haven't started on the Cosmere either and you want to know where to start, I will link that post in the description on Reddit if you want to go. It's an awesome resource for anything related to Brandon Sanderson, and you can check out different options for reading orders if you want to get started. Those are all of my spoiler-free thoughts about this book, so I'm gonna jump into spoilery thoughts. So final warning, if you do not want to be spoiled, you should click away now because I'm gonna talk about some stuff that's definitely gonna spoil the book for you. So if you are leaving, thank you so much for coming by. For the rest of us, let's talk some spoilers. All right, spoilers. Biggest spoiler: Sazed is the hero. I did not see that coming, but also it was so extremely obvious when it happened that I was like, well, duh. Like, who else is gonna be the hero? Of course it's him. Like, no one else but him could be the hero. He's the only one with the knowledge, the temperament, like the experience to actually hold the world together. And as someone, like, that's my favorite character, I was personally so happy with the ending to this. I wasn't, when it initially seemed like Vin was in fact the hero and she was gonna be all like godlike, I was like, huh, okay. I mean, I wasn't like disappointed, but I was like, okay, I guess we've been leading here. But then she immediately started to like mess everything up in the same way that the Lord Ruler did, as far as like not really knowing what to do. The power was just too vast and she didn't have the knowledge to properly use it. Like, she kind of accidentally relocated the planet inhospitably. Thought it was wild when she started absorbing like all that mist and basically turned into preservation. It's like, okay, so we're just gonna have like an eternal fight now between Vin and Ruin, I guess? Is that like what we're gonna do in this world? But no, of course, Mr. Brandon Sanderson, this is not his first rodeo. Although I feel like when he wrote this, was it his first rodeo? I think it kind of was. This was his first series, right? Anyway, he knows better than I do. Anyway, let's say that he was like, you know what, I could make it so that like Vin and Ruin have this eternal struggle, but it would be more satisfying if we take this beloved character of Sazed and all of the like the crappy things he's gone through and all of the like infinite knowledge that he has, and he is like the last keeper and he's finally regained his faith after going through this crisis of identity, and you know what, he's actually the hero. And I was like, you know what? This is why, sir, this is why you are so popular and rich. because you know what I want better than I know what I want. Nobody but Sazed has the knowledge to create a better world than he does, right? Like, obviously, it has to be him. And from what little we got to see, he was doing a pretty bang up job using all of his Terrace Keeper knowledge to actually put the world right. And I gotta say, like, it touched me right in the feels to see all the characters at the end just like marveling at a world of color and, freshness that they've never experienced before. Because the Lord Ruler kind of jacked everything up too when he got all that power. He didn't really know how to properly use it. So it was really satisfying just to see these characters experiencing the world in such a different way, what it could be, what it should have been all this time. And I wonder, like, is Sazed, is he like some ethereal being now? Is he actually still out there somewhere, like in the cosmos? I would love to see more. Is how much of a god is he? Is he just the god of this planet? Is he the god of like a lot of things now? I presume reading more of the Cosmere will address at least some of these questions, but that's what I'm left with. And I feel like Vin and Elend's deaths basically occurring at the same time, although in definitely different ways and different locations. I thought that was fitting. I thought that Vin went as far as she could go as a character. She didn't really necessarily have a place after becoming preservation, basically. And I mean, Elend did what he needed to do. He got the world set up to be ready for Sazed to come in and be the hero. I feel like both Vin and Elend had pretty satisfying endings. I wasn't disappointed that either of them died. I feel kind of bad for Elend. He had kind of a gnarly ending there, but I guess it could be worse. Like, he and his wife end up in what was like a flower field or something, right? So I guess there's worse things. I also was disappointed at Tensoon's death, or I guess he didn't really die, right? He just turned back into a Mistwraith because he like lost his consciousness, really, right? But I also feel like it was fitting. I mean, Tensoon through the whole series was constantly referring to, the desire to be obedient and to be a good Khandra. And so I think that it was really fitting for the Khandra to, the majority of them, to pull out their spikes and obey the first contract. I feel like that made sense with the expectations that were set up for them. But I just really liked Tensoon as a character, and I wished that there was a better ending for him, but like, not everybody can have a happy ending, so I just have to accept it. There's worse ways to go than just like reverting back to being a Mistwraith. I mean, just look at Marsh. Like, that was pretty gnarly, like everything that he had to go through. So I'm just saying, I guess Tensoon, in some ways, kind of didn't get off that badly. I was kind of surprised that Spook became such a prominent character in this book, but I was not disappointed by it. I thought that he had a great story. He went from a character that was just kind of in the background, and even he acknowledges he felt pretty useless, to being extremely powerful, saving a ton of people, really taking over with effective leadership. I thought that he had an awesome story arc in this, coming like this mega powerful Allomancer in a way that like almost nobody has ever become an Allomancer before. I thought that was awesome. I was like, good for you, dude. Look at you working with what you got. And then I did see we just got a glimpse of Hoid. Just a glimpse of him. I don't really know a whole lot about Hoid at this point, except that he's a thing, and apparently he's a world hopper. I haven't looked it up. Don't want to know more. I do not like spoilers. I presume it means that he shows up on different worlds in the Cosmere. I don't want to know more than that, but that's the gist that I get. I recognized him when we were in book 1. I don't know, was he in the Well of Ascension? If he was, I didn't catch him. I don't necessarily want to take to the internet at this point and double check, but I will at some point, because I think he's Is he supposed to be in every book? Is he just in a lot of them? I don't know. I don't know. I guess for that, even though we're in the spoiler section, I guess don't spoil me on Hoyd. But just for the record, I did recognize we almost got to interact with Hoyd, but things went awry and we had to jump away before we actually got to Hoyd. But I did notice him there. I also loved seeing, again, it was so brief, but finally seeing Ham be able to reunite with his wife and his kids at the end of the book. We always kind of just forget that he's got like this whole life and family that's completely separate because he is hardly ever with them. He tries to keep them safe by separating himself. So it was part of that satisfying ending for me. Like everything has been like a fresh start. Things are going to be different, and he's able to reunite with his family. I guess we're never going to find out what he ends up doing now, but in my headcanon, yeah, I'm going to do that headcanon again. Ham is off. I don't know. What's he doing now? Maybe he's like a carpenter or a blacksmith or something. He's like super strong, so he's just like living a 9 to 5 kind of life and finally being able to go home to his family at the end of the day. That's my headcanon for Ham. I really noticed with this book, and especially towards the end, that like so much of the theme of this first series is about balance. Like we've got ruin and preservation, right? They're kind of like the yin and the yang to each other, balancing the force. It's a little different, but same idea, right? The dark side and the light side of the force. So we got ruin and preservation. Sazed, of course, really the only individual who can bring that balance to the force, right? By taking on both ruin and preservation and keeping them in balance himself. And then the heroes who were not actually the hero of ages, Vin and the Lord Ruler, not being able to properly balance because they don't have the skills. So that's why they kind of jacked things up when they actually took in that power, because they just don't have the skill to actually bring that balance in that's needed. Spook, of course, his whole character arc in this book, I think, was that he had to learn balance in his character. He didn't want to be useless, but he also had to learn, like, you can go too far, man. I think he learned that there is a balance of gaining confidence, and it lies between being useless but also being like drunk on power. And then Elend, of course, his development for this book, he had to balance his past ideals as he was growing up. He had this idea of like a utopia and freedom, and he absolutely hated what the Lord Ruler did to society. But as he is now an emperor, which is something he never thought that he would declare himself, he's come to realize that sometimes you have to make some concessions. It's not so black and white. There are so many shades of gray when you have to make decisions on what you're going to do. And so it was him, I think, trying to find that balance between not abandoning his ideals, but also recognizing that sometimes you have to be practical in order to get things done. Overall, I just really want to see more of this world. I don't know if Era 2 picks up in the same, like, we know so much more about allomancy now and different metals. There's metals apparently that like we haven't even discovered yet. That was teased right at the end. And like now that obviously not only is the Lord Ruler gone, so like society is gonna be completely different structure, I would assume, but ruin and preservation are now in check because we got a new god and his name is Sazed. So what is the world gonna look like? What is allomancy even gonna be used for now that these powers are balanced and there is no more Lord Ruler? Like, what is going to become the use of allomancy? Again, I assume Era 2 is going to answer some of these questions, but I don't know. These are some of the questions that I have right now. Also, do they have to like rebuild all the cities? I know that when like Sazed remade the world or whatever, he moved the planet back to where it needed to be and like redid all of the terraforming or whatever. So does everybody have to like rebuild cities? Are we just in the wilderness now, kind of like pre-civilization humans? Like, is that the point that we're at? Are there still cities? Did he just rearrange them? Or are we just like clean slate, like we've got to rebuild everything? I don't know. Again, I hope Era 2 answers some of these questions. I did not look at hardly anything for Era 2. I really try to avoid spoilers, but I believe it takes place at least 100 years, right? After the events of this book, maybe even longer than that. So hopefully I will get some answers then, but I'm not actually going to read that series next, so I won't probably get those answers for a while. But those are the current questions that I've got after the end of this book. Overall, I'm just really happy. I'm really happy with how this wrapped up. I'm really excited that I was able to get so invested in a new series. It's been a while. I don't really get like this excited about a book series very often. So I'm really happy that I was able to get excited about this one that clearly like millions of other people are excited about too. I am very eager to start on the next one. I believe it is the 11th Metal, and I plan to do that next month as well. So probably once a month like I've been doing it. And I think those are all of my spoiler thoughts for this one. But like I said, I've been mulling this over. So maybe I will have further discussion points that I need to address with Mistborn Era 1 at some point. Maybe I'll need to have a wrap up like in a couple of months to give some actual thoughts on Mistborn as an entire series after I've had some time to like marinate with it, you know. But that's all that I've got for my thoughts. What do you think? Presumably, if you're watching to this point, you've probably read Hero of Ages. If not, and you're just a person who doesn't care about spoilers, well, hey, that's okay too. Let me know what you thought. But yeah, anybody, let me know what you thought about the end of the Mistborn trilogy for Era 1. Did you like it? Was there anything about it that you didn't like or that you wish had been a little bit different? Were you surprised by any of the things that happened at the end of the book? Let me know. Let me know your thoughts. That's all that I've got for you today. I really appreciate you stopping by. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.